Lamar and I, to me, had a good relationship. Mm-hmm. Could it have been better? Of course. Lamar and I never had an issue. I don't know where that comes from. John, I never saw Lamar and Coach Harbaugh not have a great relationship. I never saw that. I never saw Coach Harbaugh and any of our players not have a great relationship. So any of that would be news to me, but I don't know how people feel. You can't get all the credit when we do well and just exonerate yourself from the blame when it doesn't go that way. That is so ridiculously out there that I can't even live in that world. You know what? I didn't coach Lamar well enough. I didn't have as good a relationship as I could have. I didn't do the things that we needed this year to win enough games to give ourselves a chance.
It's Todd Monken, I guess soon to be offensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens, on the Ryan Ripken Show. Ryan, of course, our colleague here, 105.7 The Fan, and we'll be hearing from him in a very short period of time. Let's creep closer to baseball, and maybe even before that, when it's all said and done, but admitting didn't coach him well enough, whatever that means. I mean, you have to maximize the skill set of your best player. And in 2023, when he won a most valuable player, and the Ravens had a tremendous offense, then in 2024, took it up a notch. They added Derrick Henry to the equation. Lamar had by far his best statistical season throwing the football, had one of the 5 highest quarterback ratings in the history of the league. You figure, of all the problems the Ravens may have had, Todd Monken and Lamar Jackson coexisting was probably at the very bottom of it. But we started to read and hear, Nolan, that, maybe things weren't as kumbaya as we thought they would. The statistical rankings dropped. Lamar getting hurt obviously had a lot to do with it. Offensive line regret. We could reach for excuses, reasons, whatever, because we've been doing it since September, and now we're in the second week of January. But Todd Monken admitting, I didn't do a good enough job of coaching Lamar. Now, in what regard? I don't really know. Maybe he didn't prepare him enough. Maybe he didn't motivate him enough. Maybe if Lamar questioned things, he wasn't listening. I mean, I'm just speculating, of course. But, for Todd Monken to come out and say something that a lot of people have assumed, I think speaks volumes. And good job, Ryan Ripken.
Yeah. I texted him this morning. I was like, taking off like wildfire. Front page of ESPN here. I'm looking at it right now. It's great. Great for him.
Good call.
But anyway, I think Monken's second comment there, to me, I kind of put that in the same category as what he says pretty much every week throughout the season when they're asking him about any sort of issue that the offense might be having. And it was almost robotic in his answer. How do we scheme it? How do we call it? How do we coach it? Blah, 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 blah. Which basically just comes back to, hey, put the blame on me. I got to be better at the forefront, and that's where it starts. To me, that's where I took that second comment. I didn't read too much into that. I could have made the relationship better. I think that was just him saying, yeah, it can always be better. Even if it was great, it could always be better. That's the way you should strive. So in reality, all this reported friction between Monken and Lamar, probably not as bad as the people that thought it was, a nightmare situation. It's not that bad, but I also don't think it's nothing to see here.
Sure.
I mean, let's be honest. He's not going to go on this interview and, hey, with all this stuff flowing around about you and Lamar and friction, say, hell yeah, I can't stand that dude. I hate working with him. I'm happy to get out of here. He's never going to say that. And he's looking for his next job. So optics-wise, this actually bodes well for him. I've seen plenty of people say it on social media. Todd's answers were great. This paints him in a perfect light. Not that he really needed any extra PR boost. I mean, he's been receiving head coaching interest the past couple of years. So I think he'll be just fine finding a job.
Oh, no doubt about it. But to your point as well, Nolan, by the way, it's Featured Artist Friday here on The Fan. Bob Haynie, Nolan McGraw, Alex Scamponi is back. He's on the other side of the glass. It's Vinny and Haynie. The Cars, by the way, is our band. If you want to hear anything from them, send your song request. Plaza text line at 410-583-1057. And I'm not disputing the reports that said there was friction.
Because it came locally.
Yeah, and we've talked to it's not a national headline or any of this stuff where Lamar seemed to rely more on T. Martin. He was more of a sounding board than with Todd Monken, even not during the games because Todd's up in the eye in the sky and T's on the sidelines, but out at practice during training camp. I was at training camp one time and Lamar wasn't even there. I mean, that was kind of the year for me. But he tended to gravitate more to his quarterback coach than to the OC. And now you're trying to read between lines and all of that. But there were a couple of reports that said, things weren't as warm and fuzzy.
So maybe that's where I think I get what Todd's saying, where he's like, I don't know where this comes from or why people take something that maybe is rooted in truth, but again, it was never that bad, right? Mm-hmm. And they twist it into this whole big story to fit a narrative that, they hate each other, they pass each other in the hallway, wouldn't even look at each other, something like that. I mean, the way stuff travels these days, it really does get blown out of proportion and blown out of proportion really fast. So again, I still maintain the truth is somewhere in the middle. I think there was friction to some extent, but was it bad enough that it really hindered them from doing their job? Clearly not. Look at the last 2 years, 23 and 24, case in point of that. Yeah. And quite frankly, you don't have to like somebody to work professionally with them and be successful with them. Mm-hmm. That's any walk of life, especially pro sports.
What are you trying to say, Nolan McGraw? I'm trying to read between the lines. Anyway, it's Vinny Haynie, 105.7 The Bet. But to your point last year as well, Lamar Jackson had a brilliant 2024. Didn't win the MVP. Got it. Was first team All-Pro. So the success rate was there. And as John Harbaugh was sacrificed, and we're going to hear from Steve Bisciotti and Eric DaCosta coming up Tuesday afternoon, we also heard Todd Monken talking about that he didn't see anything that would lead him to believe that John Harbaugh had lost the locker room. Mm-hmm. As Ian Rappaport and others have reported, because everyone's got a voice now. And Adam Schefter, we talked about, we opened the show, I believe, with it yesterday, pushed back at that, said, no, guys were going in his office or whatever, contacting him, just like crestfallen over the fact that he's no longer going to be part of the equation.
Here's a new thought on that, and it didn't mention this yesterday, but the more I thought about that whole Schefter report, not disputing it, and he did mention a few players by name, right? What was it? Zay Flowers, Isaiah Likely. Only mentioned a few. But John was let go on Tuesday evening, like 5 p.m., pretty late in the day. Locker cleanouts were Monday. Now, I'm sure, obviously, some players hung around that were still there Tuesday. We got a workout in. I don't know the exit interview process they were going through. You try to get all the players and sit them down and talk to them. It's probably a multi-day thing. So, yeah, I'm sure there were some guys that were in the building on Tuesday, but to paint it as this big farewell, kumbaya, he didn't get the chance to talk to the team. Didn't get the chance to even talk to his coaches. Charlie Kohler, Ryan Ripken show again, said, I found out when the fans found out. Right. My group chat's hitting me up. I got friends telling me, hey, your coach is out. I got to go to social media to confirm it. I don't know. I mean, is Schefter telling the truth? Not calling him a liar here, but maybe overblowing. A few players are probably upset, the ones that were in the building. And, if you're still there in the building and you have a chance to say goodbye in person, you're going to do it. For a majority of the team, it was probably phone calls and texts.
You ever see Rudy? Mm-hmm. Made it sound like the scene where everyone put their jersey on Dan Devine's desk, that sort of thing. And it was probably not to that level. But the bottom line is we could sit here, Nolan, and talk about what was, what could have been, what should have been the 2025 season. The finality is 8-9. And your coach got fired. Some of the players are going to be gone, if not a lot of them. And we would assume that most of the coaching staff is going to move on and find other positions here, at least coordinator-wise. And that includes Chris Horton, too, by the way.
Yeah, another long-tenured guy.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see maybe what's next for him. If he could be a guy that maybe follows Harbaugh. But Harbaugh's been pretty loyal to him, so it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, Zach Orr, no public interview for him, but he did take to social media, basically said, that's it, looking
Peace
for
out.
the next opportunity type thing. And Monken pretty much said it in the interview, whatever's next for me, something of that nature.
Now, with Zach Orr, and he took a lot of heat the last 2 years, replacing Mike McDonald as defensive coordinator, and a lot of it justified. Unprepared and just communication lapses or whatever it is. And with the personnel he was given, should there have been more results?
Yeah. I mean, what were we saying? I'm trying to go back in time, remember what the talking points were at the beginning of last year, because that was the transition from McDonald to him.
It was all communication.
Right.
Everyone was discombobulated there.
So much to be made of that. Again, McDonald, a defensive genius, or a first-time DC, some growing pains expected. But the roster itself, pretty much the same. Maybe one or two guys missing. But for the most part, your key, especially your big-name players, Hamilton, Roquan, your leaders, Matabike, that was all the same.
Yeah, we lost him early, which turned out to be a massive...
This year.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about
last year.
Orr's
Sure.
first year. Yeah.
Gotcha.
It was the same roster that McDonald had at his disposal, which made it all the more confusing is that, okay, how can the scheme be that wildly different that these guys aren't grasping it in a way? But then you mentioned communication. All right, I can see that, but even still, it's the same players. Like, what changed? I mean, Roquan's still the green dot guy. You know, Hamilton's still the guy organizing things on the back end. I don't know. To me, it didn't make sense the operation looked that sloppy after such great success a year prior.
And then they bring in Dean Pease. We're talking about 24. They stabilized after the bye. Actually started to get better before the bye. And we're one of the best defenses statistically in the NFL last 8 weeks of the season. But this year, again, it goes back to, and we lost Matabike, as we said. Owe had 0 sacks before he was traded away. Van Noy aged another year, was a little bit banged up, so the pass rush was not. I mean, Teddy Buchanan went from a 4th-round draft pick to what, your 3rd best defensive player behind Roquan or Kyle Hamilton and Roquan for a stretch, but they just could not. He didn't seem clever. There wasn't anything unique, and I don't have the brain power to figure out a way or devise game plans. Go back to Sunday's game, for instance, Collinsworth's like, they're not blitzing because when they tried to blitz Aaron Rodgers a couple weeks prior, he diced them up. Mm-hmm. So they were playing soft coverage, and he was just especially once he got his sea legs under him in the second half. So he was out thinking the Ravens defense.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. But maybe it's kind of like, the offensive struggles in the sense that it all starts with the O-line. And the O-line was never good, and it was just terrible all year, and that had that trickle-down effect on the rest of the offense. So maybe never having a legit pass rush did the same thing for the defense, in a way. But again, kind of the same personnel. Kyle Van Noy, another year older, certainly looked another year older this year, still had some moments. You mentioned Owe did nothing before he was traded. Mike Green, far below our expectations as a rookie.
8 sacks was the prediction.
And again, the Matabike thing. Because if he's there, he's getting sacks himself. He was showing that in just 2 weeks alone. And I think his presence unlocks things for other people because he commands that attention. So I think it's a combination there. Pass rush regression could be viewed the same way the O-line regression was for the offense.
Zach Orr, I guess to my original point, sorry about that, we got off track a little bit. He was an undrafted free agent, became a second-team All-Pro for the Ravens. Career got cut short because of an injury, and then ascended up the ranks as a coach, but it just didn't pan out. So he's a Raven. Well, Zach Orr doesn't know what it's like. He knows what it's like to be a Raven more than you do as a player and as a coach. As a coach, it just didn't pan out. And I'm assuming that he'll find another job somewhere. Does he follow John Harbaugh?
Yeah, I mean, if we're to believe this report that Harbaugh wanted to run the entire staff back, then maybe that would lend itself to that. I could picture that a little more easily than Monken following him. They'll just say that. But I don't know. I think he's got to go back to being a linebacker coach. And ultimately, it's probably just too soon. And we even made the point at the time, even if you were on board with it, I was on board with the decision because I thought it was a good personality hire. The players gave him the vote of confidence. Hey, this guy's coming from within. We trust this guy. We already know this guy. It makes sense. And it just never worked out. And I think it's just ultimately a lack of experience. So, hey, a couple more years, linebacker coach, that's your expertise. He'll be a DC again. He'll get a second shot.
So the Ravens looking for a new head coach. Before we hit the break, Ian Rappaport tweeting out that the Ravens have requested to interview Joe Brady, offensive coordinator, Buffalo Bills, who play tomorrow. Or is it Sunday? They play Sunday at Jacksonville.